The 2nd of May, and this is Day 9 Daily number 457. Forgot rent again. Damn it. I really need to work on that. This is a skill that I have not yet successfully achieved. Now, a lot of you probably think that I'm in huge trouble with the landlord. There's like a grace period where the first few days of the month you're fine. I always pay within the grace period, but I'd still like to be that guy that's like 31st of the month drooling and then handing a check to him saying, hey, everything's good for next month, right? Right? But alas, no. So, everything will be fixed tomorrow. Today's daily, we're going to be looking at... this was actually done largely due to your huge flood of requests in that feedback box, and some of you via Twitter, but largely the feedback box, where about a week ago we got the chance to see the Mech play from EG's De Muslim go up against I Am Nest-T. It was a real shocker at the Winter Arena when De Muslim managed to take down Nest-T 2-1. One game with Bio, one game with Mech. And we looked at the Mech, and a lot of people were saying, I want to learn how to Mech in Terran vs. Zerg. How do I do that? Oh, no! Well, we're going to look at that today. It's not going to be one game of Mech Terran vs. Zerg. Instead, it's going to be 4 games. We're going to look at the same opening structure multiple times in a row and see the variations on it, and more importantly, how we're going to be transitioning from start to finish throughout the game. And that is it. In other news, I'm actually going to open up this little thready thread guy here. If any of you want to journey with me, oh, da-da-da-dun-dun-dun. Team Liquid, dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. Red Bull Battlegrounds, dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. Let me actually open this thing up. This is a big tournament I am heavily involved with. The Red Bull Battlegrounds Austin, where we get the Day 9 TV as part of the whole shabazz. It is a limited seating event, and you can snatch your tickets up, but what's nice is that, you know, the player list is pretty stacked. Parting, Stefano, Bomber, Teja, Pult, Ganji, White Ra, Hooker. Oh, man. I guess I should say that there's going to be another EG player announced soon. There's going to be another Tip Top Korean Protoss announced soon. I love to tease. I love to tease. And everyone in the chat is like, why don't you use Google Chrome? No one cares at all about the tournament. Firefox? Are you serious? Do you hate memory being free on your computer, Sean? I like Firefox. What the hell? Back off, guys. But I wanted to note, it's kind of a small venue when compared to some of the larger things like a BlizzCon or something like that. It's limited seating, like 1,500. So what that means is that though there are limited seats, and you should snatch one up soon, there are so few of you that I will be able to say hi. So you should come to Austin, Texas and high-five me. And I guess you can also participate in watching the players. High-five me. That's all about that. I'm trying to think any other thing noteworthy to announce. I guess Fun Day Monday, the air only. You may only make air units that are attacking all game long. The one exception is, of course, the Queen, where you may build 1 per hatchery. And that's it. So let's go ahead and hop into this game, this Terran vs. Zerg style that we're going to be looking at, where when we looked at the De Muslim Nest-T game, I'd almost recommend, like if you're watching this on archives, to watch this episode and then go back and watch that other one. It might color things a little bit. But in this circumstance, we're going to look at Mech play once again, where we're going to be playing quite aggressively in the opening game, which seems pretty contrarian to the usual Mech style. And we'll also be seeing how we don't just do an opening and then build those damn Mech units. We're going to be building some Mech, we're going to be changing composition, and eventually we're going to end up with a big Raven force, and most importantly, we're going to be slow all game long. The wonderful individual who contributed the replays today is Last Shadow, because for any of you who are like me, ever since I did that Last Shadow TVP, I've been watching his stream a lot, and he's been meching quite a lot, so I asked him if he had any replays of some cool Terran vs. Zerg, and he said, sure, I'll play a bunch today. So literally all the games that you're seeing were played in the last 24 hours. So you know that they are as up-to-date as humanly possible. What I first want to do in this daily is, in part 1, look at the basic structure of some of the aggression at the start and where it will wind us up, or more importantly, where it will wind Zerg up. And of course, we'll see kind of a caveat in part 1. In part 2, we'll see the broad, long-term focus of the build, and we'll see it stretched out over time. And then in part 3, we'll see when things don't quite go properly with that initial start opening, and then how we respond to it, and all that good stuff. So, yes. So here we go. It's going to be this thing, and yeah. This was probably one of the more requested things I've had in a while, that Terran vs. Zerg, and because you asked, this is his email for coaching. Look at that, lastshadow.email.notepad document. If you want coaching from the Terran player who's going to be doing all this stuff, this is him playing. He's actually a pro gamer living in Korea. These are all against Grandmaster Koreans. Literally 100% of the games are against Grandmaster Koreans. So we're going to begin with Lucira as an introductory game. Oh, replay quality so high. So, already we're noticing things being kind of weird. We see Last Shadow building his very first depot on 9 supply. It seems like a little bit weird. But this will, of course, allow us to get our barracks up earlier, which is the first component to our aggression. The Terran will always be Last Shadow in these games, but he's playing under the ID Yosh for this particular match. As we build that 9 depot, we send out an SCV straight to the middle of the map. Don't get in the habit of just building it in the same damn spot every game. Some games build the barracks here, some games build it over here. You just simply want to be unpredictable with this initial barracks placement. But this barracks will be going down on 10 supply. It's going to be going down quite early. Following this, we will also end up getting our gas geyser relatively early on as well, at 11. Literally 9 depot, 10 barracks, 11 refinery. This opening is what we're actually going to focus on largely in part number 1. I'll note that our Zerg player Lucira, a GSL Code S finalist, Lucira is going for the 15 hatch. And then we'll follow it up with a swift pool. This attack that we're seeing Last Shadow do actually comes quite quickly. It's actually a pretty fast push. And this is where things get a little bit technical. Because we're doing such an emphasis on the low economy half of things, it's pretty important to put this supply depot here. It's very tempting to build it here as part of this wall off, or, you know, to build a little bit farther away so that way you can get a nice organized cluster. Literally back right there in this far back side. Or literally right here, next to your depots is the good one to do. So of course we followed up with the tech lab. We follow that up with a command center. So we do see Last Shadow following it up with a Reaper right off the bat. Now, oops, I do want to focus on this timing of this SCV being sent out. I'm going to come back to 250. Right before you end up constructing the orbital command, send out a second worker. This is a kind of common time to send out a second worker, to where if this drone weren't here, if this SCV was just going by the Overlord, your Zerg player isn't going to suspect anything. Because this is around the time when that first barracks finishes up. This is actually just a really, really nice, clean timing. Orbital command popping up. Popping up. And we see that this pool is being thrown down. It looks like Lucira did go for the extractor before the spawning pool, getting that up right away. And we're seeing Last Shadow going to do the first big, fun, aggressive aspect to this build. And by the way, the second SCV gets sent out when the orbital command is almost done. We actually send 3 SCVs out to the front of the base. We're not trying to build the bunker really quickly. We're just trying to make sure that it's, at the very least, somewhat aligned with this Reaper, and that we can get some sort of bunker pressure down. I always like to begin with a game like this just to demonstrate that there is the opportunity to win games outright with this aggressive play. I assure you that this actually is intended to transition into Mech. And I'm so popular that I get texted all day long. This is a nice little bunker wall off. This works on Shakura's Plateau. This works on ESV Cloud Kingdom. Doesn't work on Daybreak, but we'll still see games where it ends up being quite effective. So this is one of your first important forays into this style of play. We want to be going Mech, but the question is, what do we do now? It looks like we're very clearly going to be able to take out an expansion. He'll either be going Roach or he'll be going Baneling. He pretty much can't break out. He could go Zergling, but he's like totally screwed. So I think that following it up with a factory before the command center is very, very key to be able to wall off this front and have the Hellion at the back side. And how do we account for the Roaches? We just start building Marauders right out the gate. And again, to note, this will eventually transition into Mech. And that's pretty essential to note that this smoothly transitions into Mech, because this barracks is going to be lifted and moved somewhere else. So we won't really have use of the barracks. So we can happily throw this forward barracks away, even lift it and scout the opponent if we want to, because we're back home building factories and relying on those. You'll also see that we have the refinery. Second refinery is coming up about as soon as we can. Generally, you want this factory started before you start refinery number 2. If you're going to refinery before factory, you have way too much gas and not nearly enough minerals. But it's the addiction that I want to just state right now to avoid is to avoid the, oh my gosh, I can kill him right now. Oh my god, this is so great. I mean, we are going to see Last Shadow do some nice leapfrogging and all that good jazz, but you don't want to be trying to figure out a way to push into his base to win right now. I apologize for the aircraft that, per usual, are throwing outside the front of the building. But what we're going to see is the most key transition in this opening is throwing down a starport. All this Reaper, Marauder stuff is fun, but this is variable. Sometimes this will work really, really nicely and get a clean kill. Sometimes it won't. Regardless, we follow it up with a fast Banshee. Regardless of how well this does, we want to follow it up with a fast Banshee. Now, obviously, this is going to work brilliantly in this circumstance. This is just awesome. I'll just straight up note. This is just totally freaking sweet and kick-ass. But following this up with a fast Banshee permits us to expand relatively easily. It denies any additional expand attempts for him. If we have Banshees, sure, we can deny his second base kind of easily, but more importantly, it's hard to get up a third base when we have Banshees, because all we have are Queens, and if we're cloaking Banshees, or hell, if we're just still building a lot of Banshees and not cloaking them, we will be able to pick off the Queens. So Lysira inevitably doesn't break this, and that's just really kind of awesome.
Complete.
But either way, not nearly as important as the opening and all the fanciness here is this follow-up with the Banshee. And as much as it sort of pains me to do this, you know, it's almost like I just made an action movie and said, you know what, we gotta have some sort of romantic storyline. And we want the main character guy and girl to be hot, and that'll end up making the viewing experience better. And I'm like, oh, but the art of it. And then it goes in the movie and everyone's like, yeah. This is kind of what I feel like I'm doing. There's a brilliant long-term mech play that we're going to end up examining. But what I first wanted to show you is that you can win right out the gate with this really fun Reaper Marauder opening. And I showed this game specifically because we didn't just win and the player left, but also we see that there's the Banshee following up. And if we look at the broad overarching situation that we see I Am Lysira doing, I Am Lysira doesn't really have that many options for a Banshee. Even coming back to the 9-minute mark, if Lysira decided to do some sort of tech or do something else, the Cloaked Banshee is going to really screw him over hard and seal the deal. So that Cloaked Banshee is the big... I'm actually closing this window again. Yet again, there are too many animals making noises outside. The only animal that I ever permit to make noises in my presence are happy birds. Awesome. So that Banshee really is the core thing. Because for virtually any answer that we would have to the Banshee, it kind of necessitates that we get some sort of layer tech up. I'm starting to feel like some of these replays might be a little bit more recent than, or might be slightly older than the last 24 hours, but either way I know that most of these should be. in the last 24 hours, because apparently someone in the chat was like, yeah, I've seen this game and this is what happens, but may have been from another replay pack. Either way, it's all good. This is the Chinese player, F91, who is a very well-known Brood War player. I think this is F91. I think this is F91. I'm only marginally certain of this. What I'm going to show in this game before we wrap up part 1 is we're going to see the same opening again, but we're going to see it work a little bit differently. And in part 2 and 3, I'm not going to lie, part 2 and 3 is the real juicy core of this daily, where we will see the long-term mech play extended all the way out, where we don't just outright win. But in these first 2 parts, I want to tease you with a really fast win, and I just want to show you when it's okay to not go mech. It's so easy to say, my game plan is mech, and then to just obey it to the point of being silly. So let's just look at one variation where we do something a little bit differently. Last Shadow is, again, going to go 9 depot, not 10, 9 depot, 10 barracks, 11 refinery. Building it in a slightly different location. Doesn't matter as much where we place it precisely, because Reapers can hop up and down everything. But more importantly, we want to be able to make it different every time so that it's hard to predict. Let us notice right off the bat that this Chinese player is immediately going for the spawning pool after the hatchery, not doing anything Lucira-like. Right when we start our orbital command, we send out 1 SCV. Right as it's about to finish up, we generally send out another SCV. I don't know if he does it this game, but generally that ends up being the case. At least 2 SCVs should be approaching forward. So we see that our Zerg buddy, despite having gone for as fast a pool as he can, this proxy barracks is virtually done with the Reaper now, which takes a full 45 seconds. It's almost a minute a Reaper. There's some cute exchanges going on here, but we still have our 3 SCVs hanging out at the front. And even though these drones are going to give us havoc, look at the Zerglings. Quite far behind in terms of production. We almost always get this bunker up with this play. Almost always. This will not kill the Zerg's hatch every time, but we at the very least almost always get it up. So let's go ahead and identify some of those core components that we saw in the last situation. I'll also note this bunker can't hit this hatchery, but it's okay to build distance bunkers with this build. You just have to have some good control. And also one of the reasons I like to suggest this build is that it's fun. Get some really fun control. Doing all your fun harassment, target firing. We got our 2 Reapers spreading out, going for different hatcheries. We see more of these bunkers being constructed. Now in this game we see that Last Shadow is going for a command center. I want you to basically break this into 3 big components in the very early game. The Reaper Rush is one. This will always happen first. Let me say, after the Reaper Rush, there's 3 things that you'll always kind of want to end up doing. The command center for the expansion, the second geyser to get all your extra gas up, and the factory transitioning into the starport. You'll always want these 3. It's okay to play around with it a little bit. So for instance, in this circumstance, we're judging that our opponent is going to kind of be defending here. We got our successful wall off down. We're feeling pretty happy with ourselves. We're going to go ahead and build this command center. This is a key location because we desperately, desperately need a wall off at the start to be able to function properly. So a target fire with the Zerglings, or the Reapers, does manage to take everything out. Some nice load in, unload micro. 2 bunkers, also very good for loading the SCVs in and out for the defense. But cool. Going for that, that good old factory. We're having some concerns about roaches coming up. No big deal. If roaches do end up coming, we just rally back with marauders. Continue to wall ourselves in. We see some pretty nice control from Last Shadow, just taking out as much as he can. And a pretty simple defense. So Yosha's not really abandoning the front. Or excuse me, Last Shadow. Yosha's the ID is playing under. Yosha isn't exactly abandoning the front. Just sort of hanging out, seeing that there's a lot of roaches coming outside the front of the base, and doing the intuitive thing. You heard me talk all about the Banshee, how that's so freaking unbelievably important. Here's the barracks lifting to return back to home. You heard me talk all about that, but This is where I don't want you to fall into the trap of just going blindly mech and just being like, well, I said I was going mech at the start of the game. I guess I have to go mech. We have pretty much won. We have the tanks to be able to deal with the roaches. We have the marauders to be able to deal with the roaches. He doesn't have an expansion. The only way we can really lose is to some craziness, like with really fast mutalisks, and we don't have anti-air yet. Maybe if he gets too many roaches and he overruns us. So I think that Last Shadow just does a very smart thing and just goes for a whole bunch of barracks as a follow-up. Just getting the intuitive mixture of things. And this is the one replay that we're going to see in all of today where Last Shadow deviates from this Reaper Rush into Banshee, into Mech. He bounces around to the back of the base, sees a Spire, whiff clicks it, and doesn't manage to successfully kill it off. So again, we might have been planning to go Mech up to this point in time, but now, easy response. We just build a whole bunch of barracks because he's going one base Mutalisk. He doesn't have an expansion up. We're just rallying in with our scary tank Marauder force. And yeah, doing the intuitive. We ring our base with turrets. It's a little bit overkill to build this many turrets, but if your opponent only has a base, it's fine. Don't worry about it too much. You're gonna win. So I like to show this game just because, you know, there's a lot of builds that kind of have some big transitions in them that you'll do 90% of the time. You know, like a Protoss player who opens air and then goes Colossus, and then goes for Blink Stalker with his Colossus and sentries and all that good stuff. Oh, a Baneling Burrow, that's kind of cool. Yeah, there's a lot of the big transitions that you'll see happen time in, time out. And it's important to just see a player who's trying to go mech because I asked him to and was asking him to get replays of it. Even he identifies a situation where he goes into the opponent's base, sees the layer, and sees the Spire, and goes, just gonna make a bunch of Marines and just go attack and win. Pretty cool, pretty clean. So, in part 1, we actually didn't see that much of the mech rear its head. We did get the chance to see this pretty cool opening, this proxy Reaper that transitions directly in to Banshee. In game number 1, we saw how the Banshee, even though it didn't get to do that much, was clearly going to be a big killing blow for the Zerg player. And also, we got the chance to see how fun it is to just win a game with Reaper Marauder. We also see how we don't really have a lot of units, but we have the ability to build super good stereotyped units. I cannot build that many Marauders, but I can build some Marauders to deal with those Roaches. I can build some Hellion Reaper to deal with those Zerglings. And I can get the Banshee up to deal with further Roach pressure. In part number 2, what we're going to take a look at is a very long game where I'm actually going to be going a lot more into the build from start to finish, and we'll spend 20 minutes looking at a really cool mech game that begins with this aggressive opening, transitions into building a lot of mech units, and finishes up with Ravens and a whole bunch of Seeker Missile fun. Woo! Let's go on to part 2